There you go. All right.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Trustee Tim,
Yes,
so Sven is MIA. We've tried to get a hold of him. If I email you the annotated agenda, would you mind stepping in?
no, that's great, thank you.
Okay.
As soon as I get it, he'll join the call.
I'm sure. I'll get that right over to you. Hold on just one moment.
Thanks.
Nothing like being late for your own party. Sorry to be late joining.
Okay, I just sent it to you, Trustee Tim.
Oh, I think I just saw Sven
Oh, okay.
name pop up.
Yep,
There he is.
Okay.
My best behavior and be casually late from the first meeting here, so I apologize.
We didn't even notice.
Okay, excellent. Sorry, I logged into the wrong Zoom meeting and I thought, geez, am I just early? And then I looked at the clock and realized I was at the wrong one, so I apologize for that. Jim will be with us too. He's just a couple minutes behind.
I'm here.
Oh, he beat me. All right, since I'm late, I think we'll kind of get going immediately here. And the first item of action is to take roll call, Ellen, I believe.
Yes,
Would you like to do that?
yes, I will. Trustee Bartholomew,
Present.
trustee Collins.
Present.
Trustee Irwin,
Here.
trustee Eustace,
Present.
trustee Mishu,
Present.
trustee Riley. Trustee Riley? I can see her. Trish, do you have your speakers on mute? We'll come back to trustee Riley. Trustee Tim,
Yes.
we'll work with trustee Riley, but we have enough to proceed.
Thank you, Ellen. First item of business here is to call an executive session. I'd like to have a motion to move into executive session.
So moved.
Thank you, Sam. Second,
Second.
Who seconded?
Mike.
Is that me?
Okay, I can do the roll call. Trustee Bartholomew,
yes.
trustee Collins,
Present.
trustee Irwin,
Yes.
trustee Eustace,
Yes.
trustee Mishu,
Present.
trustee Riley. Can we hear you now? Oh, she's logging off and coming back on. Trustee Tim,
Yes.
motion carried.
Ellen, did you hear what I just said?
No, I did not. Sorry, Trevor.
Oh, okay, I was having some technical issues. I could hear you. I'm a yes on that vote.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll give one more minute to let everyone join.
Everybody should be here. Trustee Bartholomew. We're good.
Okay. Ellen, I usually have this specific wording we generally say when we're trying to move things to the consent agenda. I don't on my annotated agenda today. So let me see if I can get this right. So to start off, we'd like to talk about the imperative to change, tab 3 on your workbooks.
We're actually at tab 1. Trustee Bartholomew, we'll have to start with tab 1 and discuss it in public meeting.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you. Tab 1 in your workbooks, and to folks listening, this is the exception to Board Policy 406, Section 7, emeritus status. And do we have any question on this? Carol, would you like to give us a brief update on this?
I'm happy to. This is an exception to the board policy due to the fact that we now have our dean of the law school reporting to the chancellor. And until the regulations and bylaws are reflected of that new reporting relationship, this is an exception to the policy that requires the board to approve the emeritus status of 2 people submitted by Dean Shoffley, who I will welcome to correct anything I just said that's not right.
That was wonderful, Carol. You did great. The issue is just that policy number 406 has not been updated. And in order to allow the designation of emeritus status of 2 very deserving, now retired professors, we are seeking the board's authorization through an exception to that policy for the dean of the law school, that would be me, to designate those 2 professors as professors emeritus of the University of Maine School of Law.
Any questions or further discussion? I'd like to make a motion to grant Dean Shoffley authority to convey
Trustee
emeritus.
Bartholomew,
Yes.
you have to ask for a motion.
Can I have a motion? Thank you, Ellen.
So moved.
Second.
I move the text of the proposed resolution.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second for approval of the exception to board policy 406. This will be moved to the consent agenda for the September 28th board meeting. And I will take the roll call. Trustee Bartholomew,
Yes.
Trustee Collins,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
Trustee Eustace,
Yes.
Trustee Mishu,
Yes.
Trustee Riley,
Yes.
Trustee Tim.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you, Ellen. The next item we have for discussion is tab 2 in your workbooks, the Aon retiree health plan update. And again, to give us an update on this, I'd like to turn it to Carol Picorian.
Thank you. If you recall, on August 17th, we provided notification to our retiree base, which is approximately 2,000 people with another 1,000 spouses, and letting them know that we were going to transition from the Aetna insurance company to provide them with a benefit that would be part of the open, what they call the open marketplace, through the Aon provider. Aon has been in this business for a very long time. They have a history of having been representative of many different insurance companies. We believe that this program will provide a benefit of the retiree being able to select a program that's best suited to their health needs. We also think that it will be more cost effective for them because they'll be in much larger risk pools. If you think about how our previous program was a sort of a closed program for just our people who were all at least above the age of 65. So, now we have broader, larger risk pools to help spread the risk of the cost of insurance. So we think that's of great benefit to both the retiree and their costs as well as to the system. And it will represent a reduction in expense to the system, which is obviously an important piece of this change. We've been educating them on the benefit. There was, as you would imagine, change is difficult. There was concern, some fear about what was this going to mean. And as we've been doing the communication rollout, it's becoming more and more apparent. And we're educating people that this is actually something that will benefit them long term. So, we've learned that we probably should have had a tighter communication rollout, but we wanted them to have a chance to sink, the information to sink in and not, create any kind of, immediate concern. But, in hindsight, we would have probably had every week had something for them to hear more about the program. So I think we're on track. We are having some pushback from the unions. The unions, we disagree in that our opinion, our stance is that the retirees are not represented by the union, so we did not consult them in this change. They feel differently, and they also are, asking for meetings for us, and we're having them to discuss how this may affect people in their units that will eventually retire. So those are ongoing conversations. And we will continue on with the plan that we have put forth. And as I said earlier, the more people get information, get more comfortable with it, I think there's actually quite a bit of enthusiasm because as we know, the Medicare, that their base insurance does not offer some of the things that people actually need at this stage in your life, like hearing and vision and other things that will help. And so they can really select a plan that might, meet their needs more appropriately.
Thank you, Carol. Any questions for Carol?
Not a question, but I have a comment.
Please.
I just want, for the public record, I appreciate the challenge here in moving from a defined contribution from a defined benefit to a defined contribution. You can appreciate where people are concerned. It's a pretty important and personal part of their lives. And I very much respect the webinars and all the outreach. I would just want to be clear, we have had discussions about making sure that we index this benefit, and I know you're committed to do that in an appropriate way, but I think we also need to be certain that we have a process that's public and that enrollees can understand about how that determination will be made.
Good point. And we will take that feedback. Is there any additional questions for Carol or the team while we have everyone? The next item we have on our agenda is the imperative for change. In the background, this is a pretty important one. In the background is moved by the tragic death of the George Floyd this past June. Chancellor Malloy issued a challenge to the University of Maine system, an imperative for change. And the chancellor affirmed the condemnation of racial injustice and violence against Black Americans, as well as commitment to examining, confronting, and ending inequality in our universities, communities, or wherever, and against whomever they exist. And Carol, why don't you give us an overview of this, if you would?
I'd be happy to. I'd like to introduce two of my colleagues that have been instrumental in putting together this body of work. The three of us have worked to be able to present this to you today, and that is Megan Clough, who is the head of learning and development for the system, and she's been a leader in this work for much of her career. So we have lots of in-house talent and knowledge to benefit from. And Rosa Radana, I'm not sure I pronounced that properly. Sorry.
Better than most, Carol.
That's how I feel about my name. Associate Chancellor in the academic, Associate Academic Chancellor, I guess is the title.
Associate Vice Chancellor for
So
students.
that was close too, huh? Sorry. But in addition to the Chancellor's challenge to all of us, and that all of us is, obviously the administration, but the students and the faculty, is multifold. And as he was quick to point out, as you can see on the first page, and we wanted to draw your attention to the fact that this just isn't like an HR project. This is a real clarion call to all of our community. And so that includes both human resources and the academic leadership. And I think that's, something to be noted, because often that doesn't happen. But we're, between Chancellor Placito and Rosa and the rest of the faculty and certainly the presidents, this is this is a conversation that everyone is welcoming, that we have, especially at this point in our history. Just as a very quick update, I won't take you through all the details, but I wanted you to know that since June, when the Chancellor made this this imperative, we have done what he asked, in that we sort of did an audit of all of the activity that does take place within the 7 universities and the system office. So on the next page, you'll see that there's been many conversations and many meetings. And as a new activity, as of last Friday, was the first meeting of President Farini Mundi, bringing together a group of 30 people, helped to be facilitated by Megan, to really get beyond just the talk and really think about how we can ensure that there's no inherent kind of bias that we have as an organization, and bringing students on or hiring faculty or treating our employees. So Megan's going to be helping the president create a sustainable part of her administration. And this isn't a task force, it's a part of her new administration that we're very proud that she has taken such a bold stand. President Cummings at University of Southern Maine has been a leader in this area as well. So we have a lot of talent and commitment already existing, but it still doesn't really meet the need of the future. And if you take onto the next slide and look at page 5, which you need a magnifying glass to see the 5, but this is really a dramatic photograph that we in data that we just thought it was helpful to put it in a context. So we know we're in one of the whitest states in the country, and we have a relatively small representation of any type of, or the different types of diversity that the world now makes up. So when you look at these numbers, it's amazing to me that I have a 21-month-old grandbaby, and he's already considered a minority in this country because he's white, he's Caucasian. So we know that the world is changing around us. We see it every day. And to think that between the ages, of 18 and 29, which is sort of our sweet spot, right? By the time 2027, those people will be considered, minorities as well. So for us to keep pace with how the world is changing and how the United States is changing, it's really incumbent upon us to take this, not just to treat people with respect and dignity and inclusion, but to really be recruiting and trying to get more people into the state as a way of ensuring that we don't become irrelevant. So the next page goes on to some of our specifics that Megan was involved back, Vice Chancellor Ryan had asked Megan to put together a white paper on how we are recruiting and looking at where we are in the current state. And quite frankly, you know, the system, humane system represents what the state looks like. But that's really not going to be good enough to ensure that we're able to maintain the attractiveness of young people coming to our colleges, our universities, people coming into the state, businesses coming into the state, if we remain in the same position that we're in now. The next page just sort of to help clarify, because there's a lot of words that get thrown around about, diversity, inclusion, equity, anti-oppression, and they all have a lot of meaning, but they have a different nuance. So we provided sort of a definition for people so that, as you read through these documents, you'll see that, as I said, there's a nuance to each piece, but it's all important. And those are the areas that we're going to be spending our time thinking about and creating advances on. Another piece before we get into our specific history is to talk about how this is not a new phenomenon. This has been being documented and studied over the years, that by having more women in positions of authority, you have higher success rates. By having more diverse people, you have more innovation, more products. These bullet points were actually quotes, but I asked that we just sort of put the lead out there, because each one of these is based on lots of research and lots of work by many people to demonstrate that this is a business imperative, it's a economic imperative, and it's a human imperative. So we have lots of backup information if you're so inclined. So as we go to page 8, which I found very interesting, and so I insisted that we have this here because I thought you would as well. But the university system has been wrestling with this over many, many years. So if you go back to 1989, there's a document that is very well created. It's very well, the whole structure is built out. When I read it, I said, well, it's all here. So this isn't like you have to come up with a magic formula. There's a systematic and sustainable way, and it doesn't happen overnight, but it happens over decades, that we could create to ensure that we're staying, apace with the rest of the country in making environments or creating environments where people are not only going to come, but then be at home, feel welcome and feel at ease here. That's sort of the second hard part. Sometimes you can attract people, but they don't feel like their families are welcome and they don't feel welcome, then we're not going to be able to sustain it. I wanted to draw attention to one quote, which I thought was really quite, quite insightful, which was that if the university isn't diverse, the educational program will be weak and our future as a state limited. And I think that all these years later is still very, very relevant and true. So over the years, you can see there was somebody or some group or some chancellor who said, we need to do more than we're doing. And a lot of good intentions were put in place. And then, like a lot of things, if they're not really part of the core, like President Farini Monday said last Friday, this is a part of what my administration is going to look like, then, good intentions go awry. And again, consistently, we have had efforts. The white paper that Megan and the HR team created is not called out here, but that was another effort under Vice Chancellor Lowe. And now here we are in 2020 with pretty much the same ask, which is wanting the Board of Trustees to see this as a priority for any future administration, and that we really make headway. So thinking about that and thinking about the unified accreditation, it seemed like the perfect time for these two efforts to come together. And thinking about how we can, from a system point of view, have influence, but also make sure that each of the universities is doing it in their way and that's relevant for them, and it feels like it's the right thing to be creating. So we decided to create sort of a chart that we felt sort of helped delineate different efforts that need to happen at the same time. And so that is, and it goes back and forth between, the university councils to the board of trustees, and this has to be a hand in glove type of relationship. But the main areas are, the human capital that we need to bring into the state, and that human capital is students. We have to create an environment that students want to come and feel like that they're welcome. We have to bring in staff and faculty and create ways in which to do that. And I think we need to improve upon our outreach, be much more creative. I was looking at some websites recently. We're not alone in doing this. Every university now is looking for directors or vice presidents of diversity, inclusion, and equity. And we're not there yet. We're not suggesting that. But what it tells me is that many colleges are having the same epiphany, if you will. That, if we're not creating environments that students want to come to, we're going to lose out. So I think we have to be much more creative on the acquisition of talent. And so that is something that I've been talking to Vice Chancellor Lowe about. I'm going to ask Megan now. No, I'm sorry. I'm going to ask Rosa to talk more about the education, research, and service leg of this artistic stool that we created, because that's obviously the area that she's so involved in and has such an expertise, and to talk about how these two groups sort of get married. So why don't you take that, Rosa, please?
Thank you, Carol. I think it's how 3 groups get married. First off, just a really quick bit of insight for you. At the same time that Carol and Megan and others on the human resource side were starting to talk about the Chancellor's charge, we were doing the exact same thing within the Chief Academic Officer Council. And as every smart woman knows, or every smart person knows, when you talk diversity, you better talk to Megan at some point. So I gave Megan a quick call and said, hey, here's what we're thinking within academic affairs, really thinking about both short-term and long-term actions. And by happenstance, a lot of this lined up, hence why you see the approach we're taking today, which is a more collaborative approach to this work. Really quickly, under education, research, and service, obviously, this is the core of the work that we do, and and many would argue probably the most critical part of what we do. And it really has a variety of factors, all the way from enrollment, how do we bring students in? How do we attract students who may be different racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, genders, all of the things that you want to have represented within your student population. How do we make sure that that process is equitable? We're having a lot of conversations. In fact, I have 2 groups already spun up to take a look at some of our processes within admissions. We're having some conversations with the CAOs related to standardized testing. As you all know, there are quite a few studies related to standardized testing and the impact that has on equity. And then looking at our language, thinking about the language, the processes we use, are we ensuring that there isn't bias in our language or in our review processes. Obviously, advising and mentoring plays a big role. Carol mentioned how important it is that we create an environment for our students. We need to create a good environment for our faculty and staff as well. And so the kinds of ideas that we've been talking about amongst the CAOs, are ideas like, building up communities of support across the campuses. If I'm a Black faculty member at Southern Maine, and I don't have a lot of colleagues on my campus with which to interact from that perspective, but there are colleagues at Maine, let's find better ways to connect folks and to really have a group of faculty of color across the entire system. And you can think of almost any piece of that would be really important to build a really critical support system across our entire system. And unified accreditation gives us a marvelous opportunity to do that. And obviously mentoring plays a key role, and especially as on the faculty side, as faculty are going towards tenure, you know, that mentoring piece becomes hugely important. Same thing for students and faculty and students. Faculty so often, you know, always act as mentors for their students. And so ensuring that they have that kind of support is really important. The academic relevance piece is a piece we're really excited about. It's going to take a while. It's a big chunk of work, but it's really taking a hard eye at our curriculum. For example, as a quick example, we have some developmental coursework. At times, certainly you see that the requirements of developmental coursework can negatively impact from an equity perspective, especially if you think about Maine and you think about some of our lower performing school districts. Automatically they're disadvantaged when it comes to the developmental education piece of this. So how do we start rethinking perhaps how we provide some of the developmental education through co-requisite education and other opportunities? How do we take a harder look at our gen ed to ensure that in fact there are opportunities for study in and a balanced view that is anti-bias, anti-oppression? Again, how do we step back and look at our curriculum with that kind of perspective? So those are the kinds of things that we're thinking about. And then obviously when it comes to faculty and student affairs staff, really thinking about diverse representation. And this gets to Carol's point earlier. You know, how do we ensure that we have a good mix of folks within both our faculty and our student affairs staff? How do we ensure that we have good promotion and retention policies for both so that we keep them? And again, so that we build a community that they're going to want to stay in and stay with us. And then also ensuring that there's good interaction with the students in the classroom, all from the undergraduate, from the early college through undergraduate into graduate. So the academic piece becomes really critical in this work. We're really excited to be joining arms with HR because so much of this intersects. And I think that we could do some really tremendous work over the next few years. One last thing to close on, I think I'm the only one in this entire group who actually was here in 1989. I remember the pluralism document. I was here in 1998. I remember that document. And I really hope that 2020, with all it's been as an amazing year, actually takes us on the path to actually getting this done and doing this work that I know we can do. I think I want to am I handing off to Megan at this point?
Yes, you are. Thank you. That's great, Rosa.
Thank you, Rosa. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, everybody, for exploring this topic. So building on what we've shared so far, the managing culture piece, I think, is probably one of the most important, because if we can imagine the cultural priority for this work drives the decisions that are made around human capital decisions and around education, research, and service. So ultimately, and my background, as Carol had said, is in working with large and small organizations over the past 25 years, including anywhere from Fortune 500 all the way down, in how do you integrate this throughout an organization. And if we imagine that our faculty, our staff, our administrators, and our students, when they come to us, they are customers who are either going to choose us or not choose us. They look for certain things. And they are easy to find. They're easy to find by either looking at our websites or looking at how we implement what we do every day. And so the equity education is, are we spending the time and energy to really help people understand what is equity, what is diversity, and do we demonstrate a clear and kind accountability around equity and how we implement things. Prioritization, it really needs to be clear to everybody that our organization sees this as core. And so that does mean that there are active diversity councils. That does mean that we have an active BOT steering committee or council. And it means that even in the tough times, because we will and will continue to face tough times, and I don't mean that with a laugh as in haha, I mean that as in a reality. We're in this for a marathon. Then we have to make sure that we don't inadvertently dismantle or neglect some of these. So that comes with how do we ensure that we are stewarding this, which means that at some juncture, every one of us is going to either come off the board or retire. And how do we ensure that this work is structurally in place within the organization so that once we leave, it doesn't disappear? And that relates to the structure, the policies, the resources. These things outlast any one individual by design and organizationally keep us strong. One of the ways in which people can see whether this is critical is in campus rituals or integration into things like our graduation or our convocation or our people, our places, our processes, our products, everything. So it is a notable amount of work. It is an achievable amount of work. And as Carol had said, it's a step-by-step type of prioritization. Which, knowing that, if we switch to the next page, one of the questions we imagined that you would want to know is, well, how do we prioritize this? And we outlined here the prioritization kind of decision-making rubric and focus on relevance, as well as strengthening UMS and facilitating that stewardship of this work. So a key to this is to understand what are our diverse and underrepresented populations sharing with us that we don't know. And as an example, on Friday's call with the UMaine Machias Diversity Council, one leader who's been here and is an underrepresented woman of color had said, you know, hairdressers, access to hairdressers would be nice. And it seems minor, and yet we can influence access to resources, social and otherwise, that allow someone to feel known. Because similarly, a next person focused on an educational nuance. So people are with us for a time, and it's not merely a short time, it's for years. So understand data. And I think all of us are a big fan of doing things that accelerate progress towards this. And that is another reason why Rosa and Carol and Ryan and myself have focused on how do you focus on what can accelerate this work. And there are known accelerants to this, including coordination and by intent. Strengthening, so fortifying our foundation. And to be clear, as Rosa had said, our product, our core product is education, research, and service. So that is where we focus our efforts. So knowing that, and knowing that we have many, many priorities in our midst right now, we felt it would be helpful to outline a short and a long-term plan and in general categories. And so the next 2 pages, the first is short-term, the next is long-term. And what we did is outline according to the 3 stools on the left-hand side, the category. And you can see that every one of the categories is highlighted, especially focusing at first on managing the culture and prioritization, since again, that drives the human capital, and focus on education and research. You'll also see that many of the resources on the right-hand side are people and time. Obviously, some also require financial investment. We were intent on focusing on things that either the financial investment is something that we feel could be handled at this point, or could be a one-time in order to slingshot progress forward. And we're provided guidance to think in that way as well, which was helpful. So there's a lot here, and yet what you can see is this would be focus in all 3 of those areas with a short-term use of people and time primarily. If we shift, and I say that because Rosa, you went into some detail, thank you, on the education and academic relevance. So if we shift to the next page, you can see the long-term, and these are, some of these are multi-year projects and multi-phase. And so our recommendation would be to start them at a time where they can continue. Additionally, some of them really need a basis or foundation that comes with the short-term education and prioritization and coaching. So these are the first steps that we have. And we wanted to bring this forward for thought process and then also talk about the next steps in timeline, since in the imperative for change message from the Chancellor, our group had been asked to bring this forward to this meeting of the HRLR. And we also wanted to propose what next steps would be. So I know Carol is going to talk through that final slide and open for discussion.
Well, as you can see, we accomplished, I think, a great deal since June. So we have potentially another period of time to even further sort of our thinking on this and clarifications of different things. And we'd love to have your support in bringing it to the full Board of Trustees at the November meeting. I think it was discussed, so that, we can get the support of the trustees as an entity. Megan, I'm never quite clear on this, but you suggested at one point there was actually a diversity committee to the Board of Trustees.
Yeah.
So it would be really sort of reinvigorating what currently exists, but creating sort of an agenda for that, or a charter, I should say, for that committee that's based on this type of work, looking at the past, thinking about how to more aggressively bring more projects and people forward into creating a longer term change for the system, and it being more representative of how America is evolving. So I'll be happy to, any one of us will be happy to answer any questions that you might have, or just general thoughts about what we've done so far and where we might go to the future.
Any questions for Carol?
Chair, I have just one question or
Please,
comment.
Trustee Collins.
On the human capital care and support orientation and onboarding, you put that at a timeline of 1 to 2 years. And maybe it's a resource issue, but it seems to me that if we're looking to change culture, that's one of the very first things that you do as an orientation and onboarding is you start that process immediately. And maybe I'm just not understanding the scope or how it's implemented or the challenge of resources, but it seems to me that that would be immediate.
I wouldn't disagree at all. And I think that is the type of work that we need to start incorporating, soon. And once, it's sort of like we have to have a platform, to really understand what it is that we want to populate that orientation and onboarding. And that starts where it starts is, the Board of Trustees, to ensure that this is the direction that both the trustees and the Chancellor are saying, yes, let's go forth. Let's invest in this, both, people, time, and treasure. So Megan, feel free to.
I would build on that and appreciate Trustee Collins, your thought on that. Fully agree that orientation and onboarding is absolutely core. And capacity right now also is significantly playing in on that particular area, and could go into more detail if desired. Capacity is absolutely a key piece here. It's not necessarily desire, it's capacity that would need to be addressed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Trustee Riley.
Oh,
How's that? Sorry.
much better.
Very important work, but I'm always struck by how challenging it is for an organization as white as we are to do it right and to not make it tokenistic and to create special committees of white people to talk about how to solve this problem. And I think it's critical that we bring those voices to the table somehow, some way. And when I look at our own leadership, it's very male. We're having a board meeting on Yom Kippur. we are not as sensitive as we need to be on very fundamental things before we even talk about some of these really tough issues. So I would urge us to keep it front and center. I think this is really important work, but to think about how we bring the voices to the table. If we use the same table over and over and over again, we repeat the same problems. The lesson I learned on this issue was from a colleague who said, what do you think about school busing, a policy from, before? Wasn't that a good thing? And I said, yeah, it was. And she said, no, it wasn't. Teller, who said, what we didn't realize, we brought those kids from their communities someplace else, schlepped them on buses, and we took from those communities the schools, the educated people who were the teachers, and we assumed that those teachers weren't good and that our teachers were better. And for me, it was a light bulb about what white privilege really means. And so I caution us to think of creative ways to bring voices of color to the table, as opposed to us somehow trying to do things for them. And that's pretty tough when we're this white. So I think Trustee Collins' point is a very important one, that we have to start with sort of the orientation work.
Right.
And I think we also have to think about what's the measure of success. We'll have lots of committees and lots of discussion. What does success look like? And it's really hard to measure culture and attitude and bias. Easier to measure employment statistics, number of enrolled students, as the example of our success.
Very important point. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee.
I would say Baba.
If I may,
Please.
I think that at the board level and at the system level, having spent 9 years in that life, there is certainly the opportunity to demonstrate leadership, create policy, hold folks accountable for the change. But I really do feel that this is the work of the presidents and the campus communities. And the one caution I would make, I'm not sure how the inventory was done. I don't even recall being asked what we had or didn't have at UMA. And the truth is we didn't have a lot, but this past spring before George Floyd's death, because of some work I had been doing outside of the university system, I asked.
I believe she's extending it to 250.
I'm sorry?
Please continue, President White.
I asked a faculty member to help with this work. She had a particular passion about it. She formed a writing team of faculty who had interest in this work. And it was a faculty project. It took months and COVID intervened, but they did complete it. And what they now have is true ownership over this work. And sometimes process is really important. It took me a long time in my professional career to learn that. My background was government. You passed the law, you implemented it, done. And I got a lot done that way. But particularly university communities, if you want to enculturate this, you have to let them be part of the process. And so my only caution is make sure our communities are in Orono, in Farmington, in Augusta, in Bangor, in Machias. And it is really important that those communities do some of the heavy lifting around this and not be handed a blueprint. And therefore, I just want to state that I do think this is the work of the presidents. I think we need support from the trustees and from the system, the kinds of support that Megan certainly can offer us. Those are really important, but don't let us off the hook. These are our communities that we are supposed to be caring for as presidents, and it's important that we do that work. And the other thing that I would say is I just want to echo Trustee Riley's comment. I also have had to learn through the work I've done over the last couple of years that we can't do this for people. They need to do this for themselves too. And so it is important to have those diverse voices at every table, at every level of this institution. And if we want to take this work seriously, I think that also means advocating for a more diverse board when appointment times come up, to ensure that those voices are at every level of the organization. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. It's helpful.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. I want to thank Carol, Rosa, Megan. Thank you for your commitment and your support on such an important topic, not just for the University of Maine or the state of Maine, but for our society in whole. Human resources and academic affairs leaders should co-deliver the presentation at the November 2020 board meeting. I think that's the next step for this item. And with that, I'd like to continue on our agenda. The tab 4, we have Employee Health Plan Task Force Scorecard. And I'd like to ask Carol again, our Chief Human Resource Officer, to give us an update.
And I'd be happy to, just so that people understand, you know this better than I probably, but EHPTF stands for Employee Health Plan Task Force. And the task force was created about 10 years ago, and it's actually a collaboration between staff and union representatives. And the intention has been to help, given how many people the unions represent, bringing them in to help them convince their membership that it's important to take ownership of your health. So this report is something that's created annually after the close of a year to give you an appreciation for the direction of which the health plan and the employees are going. And I have worked in 2 different health insurance companies over the years, so I have a bit of a keen eye on some of these metrics. And what I can tell you is that, well, I don't have to tell you, everybody knows this. Healthcare costs way too much. But I think that as a group, we're doing well to the extent that we're below the national trends. So especially on that first page, you'll see that the premium or the cost per member per month is still below what the average person is spending. And that if you take out the large claims, which we probably have 6 really big sick, people, then the number is even much less. So I think that although our costs have increased, I think that it's a pretty good story that we're not going off the charts. Now, we have to prepare ourselves for 2020, which is going to be a really funky year and won't be actuarially relevant, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But I think this is a strong presentation of where the numbers currently are, and we're not exceeding any kind of norm. On the second page, or at least I have a bigger deck, so I'll try to track section 2. That's the way to look at it. Section 2.
Yep.
Very good news. 99% of the people are staying within our network, and obviously the network creates hopefully the most favorable prices. And so, all of these numbers, I think, are something to be happy about, with a little bit higher in our primary versus specialty ratio over the Cigna norm, which is great news that people are feeling like that they can go to their primary care doctor and get the care that they need without having to go to a specialty doctor. So on the next group of the ER visits, section 3, this is where I think we have probably the most to think about going forward. We have a program called telemedicine, which does not appear to be being utilized. So I need to do research as to what that offering is and why. We continue to want to incentivize our employees to be healthy. I'm not sure we're incentivizing them as directly as maybe we would like. there's just some generalizations that I'd make, which is that we have, a good percentage of our covered lives are men, like maybe half, and men aren't as good about going to the doctor regularly as women tend to be. So we need to ensure that more men are going to a primary care doctor on an annualized basis. But our numbers, consistently are below the norm. So I think that what we're doing some things right. And what we probably need to do is just more of what we're doing right. And that is to get people to think more about their own health and getting the medical care they need early before they're really into the system. I also I realize here that the use of our EAP, which is an employee, health program, an employee assistance program, those numbers are very low, in my opinion. So I question, is it just not as good a program as it could be, or do we have other ways in which people are finding the kind of help they need? But I would imagine a year from now, we'll be looking at that number and it will be much higher, given the fact that people have been under a lot of stress during the pandemic. And it's not just emotional stress, it's sort of, finance stress. I've got finances, I've got bills. How am I going to pay them? Can you help me find a way to get my help? So we'll see what we learn this year. Our wellness program is something that I'm particularly interested in. And we have two different levels of that we provide. And that is that if you go to a primary care physician, or you have a conversation with a company that we've subcontracted with to try to help people think about their own personal health and what they need to do. And then you get a reduction in your premium costs. And we have a very high completion rate. But quite frankly, I'd like to see that 92% be that people went and had a primary care visit, because that doesn't tell the whole story. We need people to actually go to their doctor and not rely on, a telephonic call that talks about their health. So those are the types of things we've been talking about for priorities for this coming year, to look into that. The next section, speaks to the communications that we provide, and apparently, based on the communication experts, we actually get a pretty good read. A lot of people click on to our information and go deeper to get help. So that's also very encouraging to see that we've got people, our people are thinking about health. The one area again, the men, I got to get on the men. Colon cancer screening is low. We need more of it. It's the equivalent of breast exams. It's not something that anybody looks forward to, but it's really important to save lives. So I think that's another area that we need to pay attention to, and maybe do some campaigns to remind people that that's an important part of a long, good, and healthy life. So. And on the very last page, or the last section, which is overall health, we have, this is an interesting chart. I wasn't really as familiar with this one, so I called our broker, and she was telling me that they actually really do track claims over a number of years and then put you in categories, not anyone specifically, but the organization of how many people and where we spend our claims. So you'll see that we have actually a pretty healthy population that is in a low risk. We move up, of course, then to medium risk. And then the high risk is where you see the biggest expense. And that's usually your smallest population, which is consistent. But this is what drives, the premiums, is when you have these, really sort of tragic health situations that people are in long-term care, and it's expensive care. Infusion care can be horrifically expensive, trial drugs, things like that. But there's nothing that I would say, it's all shocking because it costs so darn much, but I wouldn't say that we're any, we're, I think, consistently below the norm, which is a good thing. So, as I said, this is evolving. We have to keep on people to stay healthy. Some people have spouses that smoke. That's not a good thing. It's all about not smoking, eating well, and moving. That's the key to wellness. Any questions for me? I should have probably paused between sections, but yes.
Carol, thank you. I'm confused. I'm back at section 1, slow study here.
All right.
So the
You know
data,
this stuff.
the data is actives only, but the average contract size is 2 point. So we really have 8,000 covered lives in our plan.
That would make sense for me. Yeah.
So why, and do we pay any for the dependent coverage?
Yes.
So why are we reporting claims only on enrollees?
I don't know if that's just to be able to track, the people that we have the most effect on, or the ability to control. I don't.
That would
that's a good
be,
question.
and I'm looking at our medical trend, which is high, and it seems to me that I would like to see this report on covered lives, especially if we have an obligation for those costs.
Yeah.
Because I think this is really skews the data and may lead us to conclusions that are not fully accurate.
Mhm.
So I think for future reports, that would be very useful. And the other interesting tidbit, some of the state employee health plans with whom I work have done audits of dependent coverage, and found that there are a lot of dependents who are no longer dependents.
Oh.
Divorces with stepchildren who are still on.
Oh.
And the state of, here's the state of New Jersey, they have 700,000 lives, so it's big. Saved $60 million just by doing an audit of dependents. And given where our budget is today, that might be something we want to do right now.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of cruel, and it means people become uninsured, but they really aren't people who are eligible for our plan.
Yeah.
That's true. Go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, I maybe Becky or you can correct me on the exact date, but I know we did do that maybe within the last 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was 4 years ago. So there's a timing around how often you do these, I think.
Yep.
If it is determined that it is time to do that again, I would strongly urge and would volunteer to talk about lessons learned from the last round.
Okay.
Because we did learn some hard lessons.
Yeah.
And we would not want to repeat a couple of the mistakes that we made before.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I was just going to ask about the telemedical, because I think with the pandemic, so many people working remotely, everyone's become much more comfortable with the idea and the convenience that telemedical can provide. I was just questioning if we should try and have a strategy or a communication or something to emphasize the availability of the telemedical services that are provided as a part of the plan, because it would, I'm a healthy person. I don't know where the phone number is. I don't know what the link is, but just, a refresher that, here's the little card, put it on your refrigerator or something, but, just some sort of an awareness of the benefit that's available to them. And it's for wellness as well as, when you're unwell.
Yeah, it's a good point. And of course, this data is old, this is 2019. I bet we'll see a spike, but we have been trying to communicate more frequently to people to remind them of the EAP and the telemedicine and the things that are available to them. So it's a very good point, but I'm also curious to find out more about what it is.
On the flip side of that, to Betsy's point, I think we'll see in COVID a real upswing in utilization, but it may be inappropriate. So I think we also have to take a balancing look at seeing what are we paying for telehealth, for what kinds of benefits, is it increasing utilization inappropriately? So while COVID has pushed telehealth in big ways and important ways and broken regulatory barriers, it may also be increasing our expenses inappropriately.
Good discussion. Any further questions or comments? Thank you, Carol.
But
Final item we have on our agenda for today is tab 5 in your workbooks. This is Human Resources, Labor Relations Committee FY 2021 Work Plan. And back to Carol again. Carol, would you like to give us an update?
Well, my understanding, and this is where my newness is not a good thing, is that this is just a review of the work plan that has been established in the past, and that it actually is pretty comprehensive of the entire responsibility that the committee has for that function. I'm looking to Ellen a bit to save me. I don't know if I'm answering this properly, but that was it's that this is sort of a, not pro forma, but it's a work plan that gets updated, but doesn't change a lot because it's really very comprehensive and almost everything falls within the context of the document that exists.
We do ask the committees to review it annually, just in case there are any other updates that are appropriate for the committee responsibilities. Each committee this time of year, each board committee this time of year are reviewing their work plans. So it's not just the HR committee, it's all of the committees. This will be included as an information item for the September board meeting for all of the trustees.
So I'll have it better by then.
Great. Thank you, Ellen, for the clarification, and Carol for the extra support. We'll learn together, Carol. It's going to be. So that brings us to the end of the agenda for today. Before we make a motion to adjourn the meeting, is there any additional discussion, comments, or items we should discuss? Great, seeing none.
Trustee Bartholomew, a motion is not required to end the meeting.
Thank you, Ellen. You just made my life easier on a Monday.
I was just going to say thank you to Swen and to Carol. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.